Welcome to the stress cycle. This is probably one of the most important trainings and tools and skills for you to learn in your life. So, in this training, we're going to talk about what the stress cycle is, different types of stress triggers, and most importantly, how to recognize when you go into a stress cycle so that you can build your stress cycle completion practice. That's kind of a mouthful, but essentially, a practice that can be your go-to for completing the stress cycle to make sure that there isn't a backlog of stress that's piling up and you're carrying around all of this stress, which can lead to burnout. It can lead to all sorts of complicated health issues. So this is a little bit longer, but just bear with me as we go through this training. Okay, this is why it's so important, right? Burnout is on the rise. And this is the cost of caring. So for heart-centered folks in this room, right, when you have a big open heart, when you're sensitive, when you're intuitive, oftentimes that can lead to higher rates of burnout. I pulled a couple of stats that were a little bit startling. 75% of respondents experienced burnout in a Mental Health America study. And Harvard ran a study and reported 40% of Gen Z professionals believe that burnout is inevitable. This was like, holy cow, red flags that the young people in this world believe that they have to be burnt out in order to be successful. Not on my watch. So also a Gallup study reported that 75% of entrepreneurs experience frequent burnout. 1 in 3 live with depression caused by stress or burnout. I've been in this entrepreneur world for a long time, and I can absolutely say that that is true. On the outward facing, everything can look fine. Behind the scenes, things can be a bit of a shit show, lots of stress, depression, unhealthy coping mechanisms happening. So that is definitely something that I've witnessed. And all of this is happening because of an inability to release the buildup of stress that's happening in the body. So, little history study here. Humans are incredible, right? This is just what always amazes me about us as human beings. I want you to imagine a couple hundred years ago when we used to have to go out and actually hunt and gather for our food. Now imagine that you get chased by a lion. Okay, you see a lion, it sees you, it's chasing you, and you run back to your village. Okay, your adrenaline is pumping, and you manage to outrun this lion. You get back to your village, your cortisol levels are through the roof, and you're surrounded by your community. You're able to share your story. You have a big meal together, and you're so grateful that you made it back home alive, right? You sit by a campfire, and all of the stress starts to dissipate. Now, in our modern world, for many of us, not all of us, but many people, this is no longer happening when we go out to get our food, right? And yet, our body doesn't know the difference between when we're getting chased by a lion and when we have a last minute pitch that comes across our desk and we feel like we don't have the bandwidth for it. So it's important for you to understand that when you get triggered, when you go into a stress cycle, I want you to start to recognize what is the physiology of your go-to stress response. Is it fight, flight, freeze, or fawn? Fighting happens when your body decides that your best chances here are to put up a fight. It's like, I think I'm going to win this fight. I'm going to go for it. I'm going to stand up and I'm going to fight this lion. This can also happen in an argument. It can happen at work when you feel like there's conflict present. This energy can sometimes take on the quality of, if you watch the drama triangle training, it can take on the quality of the villain, right? The finger pointer, placing blame. Okay, so that's the fight response. And if this is you, there is no shame in that. This is all about just recognizing what is my go-to stress response that's been developed so that I can survive in this world. Then what you're going to do is you're going to start to build awareness around when that stress response come up. And then in just a couple of minutes, we're going to talk about how to complete that stress cycle so it's not building up over time. The flight response. The flight response happens when your brain feels like it's more likely to survive if you run away. Run away, run away. Any Monty Python fans here? It's one of my favorites. So that's kind of the energy of the flight response. In our modern day world, this can look like procrastination. This can look like busying yourself with lots of other tasks and not actually focusing on the goal or the project. It's kind of a flighty energy, right? It's like anything but facing the thing that I have to do. I'm just going to keep running in the opposite direction. The next is the freeze response. This is a very interesting one. If you've ever watched a video on YouTube of a gazelle getting chased down by a lion, it's a little bit triggering, but it is interesting to watch. Because if they are caught, they will actually freeze and they'll play dead. This happens to a lot of animals. This is basically your brain saying, I'm not fast enough to run away and I'm too small to fight, so I'm just going to lay there and play dead. This can feel like you're numb, like you're disconnected, like you can't take any step forward. It's a very different energy from the fight response, which is angry, frustrated, right? That can be a very, very much a fighting energy. So if you find that your go-to stress response is flight or freeze, a really simple somatic tool that you can use to kind of bring your nervous system back online is just to take your hand and I want you to trace your spine as you do some inhaling and exhaling. So you start at your navel, inhale, and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And you do that a few times until you feel like your nervous system is coming back online. And then you can actually use tools like the mindset tools, like the OODA loop, which is also in this program. But if you're in freeze mode, that's not even going to feel like an option because you're frozen. Okay. So you want to come back to a somatic tool, something like this, or moving your body, going for a walk, anything to just start moving that energy so you can get your nervous system back online. The last one here is fawning. This is a rather newer development in the stress response. And this is the very nervous people pleaser energy. Like, let's say this person here actually asked her boss if she could take a day off, right? And her boss actually said, no, I don't think that's going to work because Susie Q is already taking a day off. So you're going to have to work as well. And the response from the other person is, oh my gosh, of course, no worries at all. I can actually, I can take over Susie Q's work. That's not a problem. And it's just like this over explaining, lots of words, fawning energy to make sure that there's no conflict whatsoever. It's very much like a people pleaser energy. And again, if this is you, there's no shame in any of these. What I want you to do is start to recognize what is your go-to stress response. You might have a bit of all of them at different times, but there will tend to be one that is your go-to. And I want you to start to recognize what the physiology of that is. Because we can't always control the stressors, but you can control the stress. And you know, I love to talk about a healthy sense of control, right? Control can definitely be out of balance, but there are ways for us to gain a healthy sense of control over our lives and a healthy sense of control over stress. So let's talk about it. Okay, first you need to understand the difference between stressors and stress. Stressors are what causes the physiological response to start in the body. It's what causes the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Stressors show up as deadlines, traffic, kids, money, politics, family drama, war, news. I see politics in there again, the economy. So anything that's kind of outside of your control, but it activates your nervous system. Stress is your body's physiological response to the stressor. It's a chemical process. We all know what that feels like. I remember I was on a bike one time and I was stopped at a red light and I turned around, and right as I turned around, a bus whooshed past me, and oh my gosh, my whole body just went into freeze mode, right? And I could feel that tingling of adrenaline through my entire body. It was very scary. But that is the stress response moving through your body. So we want to recognize what that feeling is, because when that happens, just like when the person was getting chased by the lion and went back to the village and was able to be with other people and able to move through that stressor, right? That's how we complete the stress cycle. So here's a visual. I always find that visuals can be super powerful when learning a new concept like this. So stressors could be, imagine you get a poor night's sleep. There's a stressor, tired, a little bit grumpy. Then traffic makes you late to work, or let's say your Zoom connection is just not working for the day. Another stressor. Your boss asks you to do a last minute pitch that you were unprepared for, and now you have to shift your appointments and your calendar. Another stressor. The nurse calls because your kid is sick and you have to figure out how to get them home, but you still have to do this pitch, right? Another stressor. Then you happen to just open up your phone, hoping to like numb out a little bit, but instead you see something triggering on social media. Another stressor. Or you just read the news, right? Major stressor. So what you're left with is a buildup of stress just in one day in your body. And your body doesn't know the difference between being chased by a lion and being told that you have to give a pitch in an hour. Okay. It's the same physiological response. So when you don't deal with it, it compounds over time and you end up with this backlog of stress. So what we're going to do today is make sure that you have a practice to deal with that stress. Chronic stress over time, I'm sure you've read the stats, right? It can lead to all kinds of health issues: hypertension, heart disease, obesity, diabetes, addictions, anxiety. Okay, anxiety and depression, very rampant in our world today. And so that is happening because there's this buildup. Well, one of the reasons it can happen is because there's a buildup of stress and it just hasn't been released. So you did the pitch for the day and it went well. So you did deal with the stressor. It doesn't mean that you've dealt with the stress in your body. So what you are going to do is create a conscious stress cycle completion plan. Okay. Here are some examples. Any physical activity. So a walk, dancing, exercising, going for a run, doing some jumping jacks or push-ups, any kind of physical activity can help to complete the stress cycle. Going back to that video, if you've never watched a gazelle, there's a pretty wild video on YouTube. I'll link it below this video here. Trigger warning, because the gazelle does get caught, but it does get away. So if you're up for watching it, it is pretty remarkable to see how the gazelle releases the stress, because what it does is its body goes into this shaking, and the shaking is how it's relieving the stress, right? It goes into like this shaking response. So that would equate to the physical activity that if we just like shake it off, if we get up, if we jump up and down a couple of times in between our Zoom calls, right, we can shake off that stress. And it doesn't take long. It doesn't need to take a long time. So even though this person from a couple of slides ago, right, might have all of these different stressors, it doesn't have to take a really long time to complete these stress cycles. And in fact, when we talk about feeling your feelings all the way through, On average, that can take about 90 seconds. So even with all of these different stressors, that's like 10 minutes, right? If we were to do the math. Now, it's not an exact equation, but you get the idea, right? That when you go through this stress cycle completion plan, you're going to relieve that stress from the day, and the stress won't be creating that backlog. So 90 seconds of deep breathing, right? The box breathing that I've taught so many of you, right? Inhale for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. Box breathing is a really powerful way. Any kind of deep breathing, meditation. Now, caveat, if you are in the freeze response, you don't necessarily want to be turning toward meditation. That can only compound the freeze response. So I would recommend going out for a walk. And then if you feel like meditating, great. But often when you're just like sitting in the freeze and then you try to meditate, it's not pretty. Any kind of positive social interaction. So when I almost got hit by that bus, right? I called my husband. I'm like, oh my gosh, this just happened and I'm scared. And it was really, a terrible thing. And I thought my head was going to get taken off. So having that kind of conversation can also help to complete the stress cycle, just reaching out to somebody, grabbing a coffee with a friend, going for a walk. Think the blue zones, if you've ever read or watched anything on the blue zones, right, where people share meals together, they have a real social environment. That is a wonderful stress reliever. I see it here in Ireland all the time. They say the pub is their therapy sessions. And I do see people, they're not always drinking in the pub, right? They really go, especially the older generations, they go for that positive social interaction. And some of the little old ladies get like a tiny glass of Guinness, and it's just the most adorable thing. Laughter, real, genuine laughter. I'm a huge fan of comedy. So if you have your go-to comedians, right, that can be an amazing stress reliever. That's something I turn to quite a bit. Affection. A 20-second hug is a wonderful way to relieve that stress. If you have a pet, petting your animal is a wonderful way to relieve that stress. Just like 5 minutes, sit there, cuddle with your pet. If you feel like you need to cry, right? We talk a lot about like actually feeling your emotions, allowing yourself to have a nice cry can complete the stress cycle. Okay. And remember that when we allow ourselves to feel the emotion fully, it can complete like that, and the energy is released. And then finally, creative expression is another wonderful way. So this could look like knitting. It could look like some kind of craft project. My husband, I can actually hear him in the other room right now. He's between Zoom calls and he's playing his guitar. And that is a way that he is kind of relieving stress throughout the day by just practicing guitar just for his own pleasure and enjoyment. So your next step is to create your plan. I want you to try out a couple of different things and see what works. Something that can be helpful is to keep an observation journal throughout the day for about a week and just like track some of the stressors that are coming up. So then at night, you know that you can actually complete those stress cycles. All right. I want you to have your go-to tool for completing your stress cycle so you're not having that backlog of stress building up in your body. So that's your next step, is to create your plan. And how will you know when you've completed the stress cycle? Well, you will feel it in your body. And when you tap into and allow yourself to feel, you will know that you've completed the stress cycle. You'll actually start to notice the regulation in your body. And to end, I love this definition of wellness. Wellness is the freedom to move fluidly through the cycle of being human. And that is from Emily and Amelia Nagoski, and they wrote an incredible book called Burnout. And homage to them for teaching me all about the stress cycle, so now I can teach it to you. Okay, so I want to hear, what your plan is for completing the stress cycle. And I'd love to know what you've discovered and what works for you. Okay, bye for now.